In the darkness of secrecy, sinister interest and evil in every shape have full swing. Only in proportion as publicity has placed can any of the checks applicable to judicial injustice operate. Where there is no publicity, there is no justice. America is a land of unique diversity, blossoming from its engraved promise of freedom, the pursuit of happiness, and the freedom of the citizens to think freely, communicate, learn, share, and prosper. Only in the hands of the greedy and corrupt does our tool of creation become the weapon of corruption and destruction that we currently are. Our reality is a reality that can be changed only by the wills and actions of free minds. What is the FCC, and why is ending net neutrality a danger to society? FCC is an acronym for Federal Communications Commission, which was created on June 19th of 1934. They were established to regulate communications for the military, emergency responders, other governmental agencies, and the public in order to ensure fairness and non-interference in communications. Their other primary function was to break up communications monopolies. In 1934, the FCC brought down the National Broadcasting Company as they felt that the NBC had become a powerful monopoly in the industry. Over the decades, as America's politicians' priorities and focus shifted from the people to corporate favor, the FCC's duties of protecting the people's interest for consumer access and fairness and freedom of choice from the manipulation and oppression of all too powerful communications corporations have pivoted to appeasing and growing these corporations instead. This corruption of power is how we as American citizens have found ourselves in this dangerous position of not only becoming severely oppressed by unchecked and unindulged corporations, but also ultimately silenced in the cyber world as we're censored out of our right to free speech, independent journalism, and freedom of access to information. As most citizens in America are aware, there is a clear correlation between corporate money and political corruption. Lobbyists buy policies in political favor in the forms of donations and incentives. These purchased policies often result in the direct oppression or endangerment of American citizens. This happened due to a passing of a bill that is ironically named Citizens United. In 1998, Ajit Pai, the new chairman of the FCC, got his start as an attorney on the Justice Department Telecommunications Task Force for Mergers and Acquisitions. Interestingly enough, Ajit Pai once worked for telecommunication giant Verizon, and immediately after began his rise up the political escalator. Fast forward to today, Ajit Pai and the other commissioners of the FCC seem to be determined to obliterate the societal protection that is net neutrality. This prevents major communications companies from establishing an alliance of big business monopolies that control access to the internet. Losing net neutrality will destroy the futures of millions of businesses that depend on the enforced freedom and safety of net neutrality to enable their businesses to grow and prosper without monetary limitations. Repealing net neutrality would be comparable to an all-out assault on the small business economy that is the backbone of American society. If this vote is allowed to pass, then communications corporations will be allowed to section off and sell segmented access to the internet and its channels of communication such as messaging, social media, video, email and cloud services, music, and much, much more. This includes everything online that has come to be known as a societal necessity. They'll be able to sell access to these necessities as individual monthly services. Portugal serves as the perfect example of the consequences that ending net neutrality would create for American citizens and small business owners nationwide. This seems to be a big leap into an economic crisis as the FCC escalates the corporate war on the poor in an already societally hostile economy. This single action will cause millions of small businesses to fail as they find it impossible to balance an already overextended budget with these new inflated prices that they have no choice in paying in order to gain access to the functionalities of the internet needed in order to keep their businesses in business. It will also prevent just as many small businesses from ever getting a fair start. While the effects will be devastating, sadly, the corporatization of the internet doesn't seem to be the sole endgame of this crusade to end net neutrality. Through an analysis of political science and an in-depth look at a history of legal and political strategies, a determination was able to be made that the motives for this destructively disruptive political action appears to point more toward the probability of this crusade being used as a mask for a far more insidious task. There is a pattern that exists to which the public should be paying a lot more attention. In both the distant and very recent past, whenever there is a mass social activity or a movement reinforced by a legal and constitutional right that threatens a spun narrative or action taken by America's mass of corporate indentured politicians, there's suddenly a law passed blocking or severely limiting the public's expression of that right, or there's a repeal voted on to serve the same purpose of oppressing the public's expression of the rights that allow American citizens to speak in favor of our own interests and oppose activities and policies that are felt by the masses to not be in the best interest of American citizens and our society. The issue for elites is that these rights allowing for free speech and journalism are more of a threat to the cloak of ignorance and fear used to control Americans for over a century, and these rights have never been more of a sufficient threat than at this moment in time, right now. But can you guess why? Answer? The internet. Modern advances in technology have drastically moved up the timetable and resources for how, where, and when Americans can receive their information. Thanks to social media sites like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, independent journalism has experienced a massive increase, which has led to a governmental lack of control of the information released for public consumption. This has resulted in a colossal boom in social awareness, social and political activism, political discourse, legal knowledge, and platforms to express and share progressive ideologies and other information crucial for the socially positive progress of society. Without being able to legally impede the spread of cyber freedom, information, and knowledge, those who seek to maintain societal control have decided to turn to a corporate alternative as a solution. The FCC is prepping to follow a dangerous trend of enabling private sector censorship. This puts the responsibility of censorship in the hands of contracted and private corporations. It will allow corporations to censor out information pertaining to political scandals, corporate violations, and whatever other information the elites may not want to be for the knowledge of the public. This means that corporations can be contracted by the government and other private entities to censor or advertise certain information, making it possible to bypass constitutional law with corporate laws and rights. Many would assume this would be illegal, and it would be if not for corporate personhood. Corporate personhood is an acknowledgement of the legal rights given to corporations that entitle them to the same rights as an everyday flesh and blood American citizen. Corporations oftentimes receive more rights in favor than the American citizens. In 2007, Verizon attempted to block communication between members of a pro-choice abortion group and their supporters under the grounds of this type of communication being controversial or unsavory to the company's personal standards of what's acceptable. Though this attempt wasn't successful, many other major telecommunication companies like Comcast and AT&T have been accused of similar attempts to censor and regulate internet traffic and bandwidth. Allowing private telecommunication companies to wield this kind of power unchecked will have a decimating effect on modern society's ability to communicate, organize, and function freely. Fast forward to the FCC's attempt to repeal net neutrality and it all starts to make sense. By allowing the telecommunication giants to have free capitalistic reign of the internet, they not only ensure that they can more effectively censor information, they also ensure that this action is legal and protected by passed bills and the loophole of corporate personhood, ensuring the corporation's freedom of speech to show only what they choose to endorse. Those with enough money to pay for these inflated sectional services will have access to a controlled net of information, while the masses will lose access to any information other than what is provided through corporate mainstream media outlets, which the FCC heavily regulates as well. This also means that a massive amount of the population that is below the poverty line, which represents a massive percent of the majority of this nation's population, will no longer be able to access the internet and all of the socially and societally progressive information, along with the watchdog sites dedicated to governmental transparency provided by independent journalists and activist websites like WikiLeaks. This will also effectively put a halt on the ability of mass communication for social organizing, outreach, and activism. In boxing and mixed martial arts terminology, ending net neutrality is a covert political KO to the social progress of society. In chess, this would be considered a well-strategized checkmate. This move allows them to once again blanket society in a sadly familiar cloak of mass ignorance. As we are all learning in light of our growing social awareness, fear is the most effective tool and weapon for controlling those who are ignorant of all they aren't exposed to and can easily be controlled by those who control the information. One's reality is subject to perception. Perception is the decision that we are unaware of making. What one is able to perceive ultimately shapes what one will come to believe. In line with what President John F. Kennedy tried to warn the citizens of this nation about. Now, more than ever, it is crucially important for American citizens to realize the power that our unity contains. Without the cooperation of the people, these corporations have no power. Without the will of the people, these corrupted politicians hold no offices, and without the unity of the people, we will forever remain victims to a game that we can never win due to the negative consequences of our own inactions. Once one knows better, they now inherit the responsibility to do better. It's time for us all to do better as citizens of the most wealthy and powerful nation on earth. It's time to effect actual positive change on not just our society and our country, but to create a positive change of cause and effect that will ripple around the world. We mustn't allow our ability to unify our voices to be stripped away and censored down to nothing more than a mere whisper. Time to take responsibility and become the captains of our own fate. The way to do this is to make our voices so loud that we can never be silenced by those who seek to conquer and divide our great nation of men. Contact your senators, and more importantly, contact the commissioners of the FCC and their staffs, whether it be by phone, email, or through all of their individual social media pages. Contact them and make them hear the voice of unity when you tell them that we, the United citizens of the United States of America, will no longer allow ourselves to be oppressed and censored into silence. We, the United citizens of this great country, will not allow our freedoms to be replaced with corporate standards and bylaws. Tell them that the ever-echoing voice of the United citizens of the United States of America will no longer be ignored. Freedom is never free. We must be willing to protect and defend our freedom together. Take action now.